I have lived on very little money. I have also earned more in a single year than many people will earn in a lifetime. And the longer I spend around money, the less interested I become in generic advice. The broad principles of wealth do not change much. Spend less than you earn. Build reserves. Invest patiently. Avoid foolish debt. Think long term. Those ideas are timeless, but the way you apply them should change depending on where you actually stand. That is one of the biggest mistakes people make with money. They treat all advice as if it were equally useful at every stage. It is not. The person trying to survive on $35,000 does not have the same financial problem as the person making $75,000. The person making $100,000 or more does not need another lecture about saving $3 on coffee. If the real leak in his life is a six-figure house decision, a luxury vehicle, a 1% advisory fee, or a complete failure to define what a rich life is supposed to look like. So if I were going to tell the truth as plainly as I know how, I would say this. At low income, your first job is breathing room. At middle income, your job is systems. At high income, your job is clarity. Most people get trapped because they are solving the wrong problem for the income bracket they are actually in. When I was starting out, I knew what it felt like to have almost no margin. In my first months working on my own company, I made very little. My salary did not suddenly appear with a parade behind it. I lived simply because I had to. Shared space, careful monitoring, a constant awareness that there was very little distance between normal life and a genuine problem. When people have never lived in that part of the map, they often underestimate how exhausting it is. If you make around $35,000 a year, after taxes you do not have much room to breathe. Rent, transportation, food, utilities, and debt can consume almost everything. One unexpected repair or medical bill is enough to make the whole month wobble. That is not a mindset problem. That is arithmetic. And when arithmetic is that tight, the first priority is not dreaming about some elegant investment portfolio. The first priority is survival with dignity, breathing room, a small buffer between you and catastrophe. That is why I would tell a person in that income range to save 5 to 10% of take home pay if at all possible. Even if the amount feels painfully small, $50, $100, whatever, can be held onto consistently long enough to create the first little wall between life and panic. People often tell me that amount sounds trivial. It is not trivial. It is the beginning of a shock absorber. Most people who have never built even a small emergency fund do not realize what it changes. It does not make you rich. It does not retire you. It simply stops every surprise from becoming a full-blown emergency. That alone can change the entire emotional weather of a life. The next car repair no longer has to become a credit card spiral. The next medical copay no longer has to be funded with shame. You still feel pressure, yes, but pressure and helplessness are not the same thing. This is why I have never liked abstract personal finance sermons aimed at people with no margin. If you tell someone drowning in arithmetic to skip coffee, while ignoring the fact that the real problem is the total structure of their life, you are not giving advice. You are moralizing on the cheap. The right approach at that level is practical and temporary. Cut what can be cut, cancel what is unused, negotiate bills. Ask the internet provider for a lower plan. Ask the phone company what they can do. Ask creditors for hardship options before you miss payments rather than after. Look for overtime. Look for extra shifts. Look for any lever that can create $100 or $200 a month of breathing room. A lot of people underestimate how life-changing that can be. Not because $100 or $200 is huge in the abstract, because when there is no margin, even a little margin becomes strategic. But this is where many people get stuck. They become very good at surviving one more month and never transition from survival to strengthening. They build the emergency cushion. Maybe. They attack a little debt. Maybe. Then they settle into a life of permanent strain management. That is why I believe the third priority at that lower income level is earning power. There is only so much fat a person can cut when he is already living close to the bone. If you want your relationship with money to change significantly, at some point the income must change too. That sounds obvious, but people avoid the practical implications. They keep waiting for the current job to become generous. Jobs are not charitable institutions. They pay according to value, leverage, replacement risk, and circumstance. If you want a materially different outcome, you often have to go and build it. Learn something, take a low-cost course, use free platforms, practice a marketable skill. Put yourself in rooms where opportunity exists instead of staying parked, only where familiarity lives. One conversation with someone doing the work you want can be more valuable than a year of private wishing. I have seen people create very large changes in income, not by waiting for permission, but by deliberately moving into fields where their labor was priced better. That move does not require a perfect background. It requires seriousness, persistence, and willingness to begin before you feel fully ready. The person who learns UX data work, sales, operations, project management, or some technical or commercial skill that businesses actively need is not just learning a skill. He is changing the market value of his time. That is one of the highest leverage financial moves available to someone starting with very little margin. Now, once a person gets to the 75,000 range, something interesting happens. The nature of the problem changes. There is usually more room now, bills can be paid, the stress is lower, maybe some savings exist. But this is a dangerous stage because many people mistake relief for security. They feel better than before and assume the rest will take care of itself. It will not. Middle income is where the game shifts from survival to system building. That is where I would tell someone to stop asking $3 questions and start asking $30,000 questions at the beginning. Little cuts matter because the margin is thin. But once you have room, obsessing over microscopic expenses can become a form of financial procrastination. People get very emotional about tiny subscription changes or whether they should switch grocery brands, while ignoring the enormous impact of employer retirement matches, investment fees, contribution rates, tax shelter, housing costs, and career growth. That is backwards. The first big system I want built at that stage is automatic investing into tax-advantaged accounts. Employer match first. If a company matches your 401 contribution up to a certain percentage, that is not a suggestion. That is a structural gift. It is part raise, part forced good behavior, and people who walk past it because they feel vague about investing are leaving real money on the table. Then comes retirement accounts like a Roth IRA or equivalents in other systems, where taxes are treated more favorably and the long-term compounding can work under better conditions. This is one of the least dramatic and most powerful truths in all of personal finance. Wealth often comes not from exotic investments, but from ordinary disciplined use of boring tax rules over a long period of time. I have tremendous respect for boring things at work. Then comes automation. I do not trust people who rely entirely on willpower around money. I do not trust myself entirely either. People are too busy, too emotional, and too inconsistent. If every month requires a little speech to yourself about whether you are going to save this time, then the system is already weak. At that middle income range where extra money exists but can also disappear very quickly into lifestyle creep, automation is crucial. Let the money move before you have a chance to turn it into dinner reservations, impulse shopping, or random leakage. The 401 contribution comes out before you see it. The Roth transfer happens on schedule. The home down payment fund is automatic. The travel fund is automatic. The emergency reserve continues to fill quietly. This is how ordinary people create wealth without feeling like they are constantly wrestling themselves. The system carries some of the virtue for them. I like that. It is intelligence about human weakness. This is also the stage where I think people should stop asking low-leverage questions. A person making $75,000 should not spend all his financial energy chasing $10 wins while ignoring $10,000 opportunities, negotiating a meaningful raise, increasing the savings rate by 1% every year, choosing lower fee investments, deciding whether to buy or rent in a way that actually fits the math. Those are the questions that move lives. Most people ask tiny questions because tiny questions feel safe. Bigger questions demand that you think strategically. That is uncomfortable. Now, once a person crosses into six figures, another transformation becomes necessary. High income gives people room, but it also gives them enough rope to build a very expensive trap. I have met plenty of high-income earners who were excellent at making money and terrible at deciding what money was for. That is a dangerous combination, because when your income rises and your purpose does not, the culture will volunteer a purpose on your behalf. Bigger house, better neighborhood, nicer truck, more expensive habits, more socially legible success. Everyone around you calls it normal. Soon your money is no longer buying freedom. It is buying a more luxurious form of dependency. That is why at 100,000 and above, the deepest work is clarity. What does rich mean to you? Not in a slogan, not in some abstract sentence about freedom. What do you actually want your money to do? Do you want mobility? Do you want a simple life with abundant travel? Do you want to support family? Do you want a beautiful house and the roots that come with it? Do you want flexibility to take 6 months off? Do you want first-class travel and world-class hotels? Do you want to be absurdly generous? Fine, say so. But define it, because a person who cannot define rich will spend money according to other people's fantasies. That is one of the great tragedies of high income. People reach a level where they could genuinely design a life and instead outsource the design to default American consumption. They buy what everybody buys. The 3-bedroom home because successful people buy homes. The expensive truck because it signals solidity. The endless upgrades because this is just what people do when they make it. Then they wonder why they are still anxious. The answer is simple. They are living the market-tested template for looking prosperous. I have no interest in templates. I want specifics. Specificity gives money direction. Direction prevents waste. This is also where fees matter in a way many people do not appreciate. High earners often arrive in the stage of life where some pleasant person named Chet, or his equivalent, appears with a warm handshake and a 1% assets under management fee. 1% sounds harmless. It sounds civilized. It sounds like a small toll in exchange for having a money guy. But 1% on a large long-term portfolio is not small. It is a deep wound. On $100,000 over decades, that little percentage can quietly cost a person an extraordinary sum. Not because the fee itself looks dramatic in any single year, but because the compounding that fee never gets to do is what truly disappears. This is why I think people need to separate advice from asset skimming. There may be excellent reasons to hire professional help. Complexity, behavior coaching, tax planning, pivotal life transitions. Fine, pay for expertise, pay well, but understand what you are paying, how you are paying, and what it will cost over time. A flat fee, project fee, or hourly fee can often make much more sense than permanently surrendering a percentage of your future to the comforting feeling that someone is watching the account. Comfort is expensive when you do not price it, honestly. The same need for clarity applies to housing, perhaps even more strongly. The culture speaks about homeownership with religious confidence, as if buying is always morally and financially superior, and renting is a confession of immaturity. I distrust that kind of certainty. Housing is a math problem wrapped in emotion. Buying can be wonderful, renting can be wonderful, buying can be terrible, renting can be strategically brilliant. The answer depends on time horizon, market conditions, financing costs, transaction costs, opportunity cost of the down payment, ongoing maintenance, and the value of flexibility. People love to say renters are throwing money away. The line is too simplistic to be useful. Homeowners throw money away too, on interest, taxes, maintenance, transaction friction, and capital tied up in a single illiquid asset. The question is not which side gets to feel morally superior. The question is what actually produces more freedom, more stability, or more wealth for the life you are really trying to live. A high earner who rents below his means and invests the difference intelligently may be making a deeply strategic decision. Another may buy and gain a sense of permanence and emotional security that is worth the premium. Both can be right, both can be wrong. Again, the point is not to obey the culture. The point is to run the numbers and then choose consciously. That is a recurring theme through all income levels, but it becomes especially important as income rises. When the stakes get larger, vague thinking gets more expensive. A $10 mistake barely matters. A $100,000 identity purchase matters a great deal. So if I were to tell the truth about income brackets as clearly as I know how, it would sound something like this. At the lower level, stop the bleeding and create breathing room. At the middle level, automate and build systems that quietly make you richer. At the higher level, define the life. Eliminate the silent wealth destroyers and stop confusing expensive defaults with success. And at every level, understand the same foundational truth. Wealth is not built by looking successful. It is built by arranging money so that more of your income survives, compounds, and becomes optionality. Optionality is the thing people are really after. The ability to say no, the ability to absorb a shock, the ability to choose, the ability to define a rich life and actually fund. That is why I do not get overly impressed by income alone. Income is potential. Structure turns potential into freedom. Without structure, more income often just becomes a more expensive mess. With structure, even moderate income can become a remarkable life over time. I have seen both outcomes often enough to trust the pattern. It is not about being perfect. It is not about winning every category at once. It is about knowing what stage you are in and solving the right problem for that stage. The person at $35,000 who beats himself up for not investing heavily while carrying no cash reserve and thin margins is solving the wrong problem. The person at $75,000 who pinches pennies but never automates the employer match or the Roth contribution is solving the wrong problem. The person at $200,000 who still has no idea what rich means and keeps buying whatever everyone else buys is solving the wrong problem. The problem changes as the income changes. That is maturity. And if a person can truly understand that, then the money starts making more sense. He stops applying the same blunt advice to every stage. He stops feeling guilty for not focusing on the wrong things. He starts building a strategy appropriate to his actual reality. The stress drops, the signal improves, the waste gets easier to identify, the right next move becomes much clearer. That is all I have ever wanted from money advice, not perfection clarity. If I had to leave someone with one final thought, it would be this. The purpose of money is not to make you look like someone else's idea of success. The purpose of money is to support the life that matters to you in the most efficient and durable way possible. Breathing room systems, clarity, get the right one first, and then move to the next. Do that long enough, and money stops being a source of permanent noise. It becomes a tool, and used properly, a very good tool can buy something close to freedom.